Hello students, welcome back to my class. Today we are going to study poet Sir Derek Walcott's poem A Far Cry from Africa. As we know, Sir Derek Walcott is a post-colonial Caribbean poet, essayist and dramatist who received Nobel Prize in Literature in 1992. As a poet, he explores the themes of dislocation, conflict, hybridity, and belongingness. And his poetic themes mostly focus on the Caribbean culture and history, the effects of colonialism, and one's relation to language. But as a poet of post-colonialism, we will definitely find within his poetic body the issues of slavery, migration, separation, resistance, difference, race, gender, place, imperialism, so on and so forth. The poem, A Far Cry from Africa, the very title itself has multiple suggestiveness. Maybe it is from the Africa, the impression of conventional Africa is completely changed in the present reality that he has presented in the poem. That's why it is a far cry. Or maybe the cry of Africa, the Africa which is ridden with the conflict between the imperial power and the rebels and the various ethnic conflicts that is affecting Africa. So that is far away from the other parts of civilization, and people are quite ignorant about the present crisis of Africa. So the title may suggest also that. So let us look at the poem. A wind is ruffling the tawny pelt of Africa. So immediately the poet is bringing a metaphorical impression, a metaphorical presentation of Africa. Africa as the ruffling the tawny pelt. Here tawny pelt, it refers to that lion's fur, the color, the tawny color of the fur, which is being ruffled by the wind. That means Africa is the land of the lion, and lion suggests self-contented pride. It is the land of self-contented pride. Kiku, quick as flies. And Kiku, the dominant tribe in Kenya, because this poem is discussing about presenting about the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya during the 1950s, from 1952 to 1960, when the uprising was taking place. Kenya was going through a great turmoil, and these Kiku tribal gorillas were fighting the British colonizers for their freedom. So the Kikus, quick as flies, here the narrator or the poet is identifying the Kiku as flies. They're as quick as flies. So there is an immediate deviation from the impression, the image of Africa as the land of lion to the land of the flies, because the African flies are also very popular in its symbolic presence. The flies, they are being detested and being feared by the white colonizers, the white settlers. They were very much afraid of the African flies. So here Kiku, These rebels of the tribes, they are quick as flies, batten upon the bloodstreams of the belt. Belt means the land, the stretch of the land of Africa. They are just like the blood streams, they are like the veins. They represent, they're the dominant tribes of Kenya. They are the veins of this land. Without them, this land has no identity. They are as the veins are the primary, inalienable part of our body. So these tribal people, they are the inalienable part of this land. Corpses are scattered through a paradise. There is a further shift when he is bringing in the contrast of image of Africa from the land of pride to the land of the flies who disturb and to the paradise. Africa was considered as a paradise. Why? Because Africa is considered as the place of creativity, the place of complete nature. The anthropologists consider Africa as the birthplace of humanity. So it is a paradise which has everything, which has the whole creation, but corpses are scattered through. But it is being contradicted, contrasted with the present situation, which is scattering corpses. The dead bodies are scattered through the violence. The violence not only created by these KQ rebels, but also by the suppressing British forces. Only the worn colonel of carrion cries. And this paradise has now become a land dominated by the worm. Further shift or degradation from the land of the lion to the land of the worm. Colonel of carrion cries, and the worm as the colonel, as the colonel, gives the advice, gives the order. Waste no compassion on these separate dead, that all the dead are not entitled for our compassion. Only the dead who belong to us, to our race, to our color, they need the compassion. The other separate dead, here even the dead bodies are being, the dead are also being separated by their race, their culture. Statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. The narrator or the poet is bringing out that from where these divisive ideologies have emerged. He is referring to the colonial theory. The colonial theory which was based on various self-gratifying, self-glorifying ideologies to dominate over the other parts of the humanity. So the statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. So those scholars of imperialism, those advocates of imperialism, they advocated imperialism in the name of so many things, and one of them being the white man's burden, that as if the white man has the burden to civilize, to subjugate other races, other people, to make them civilized. But in the name of that burden, which is considered as a hypocrisy, they wanted to exploit everything. Therefore, the scholars seize the salient of colonial policy, they justify through statistics, through various self-created values, the inevitability or the glories of colonial policy. What is that to the white child hacked in bed? And through that colonial policy, they dominated, they exploited, they perpetuated mindless violence and destruction on different civilizations, different people, different races. But the narrator or the poet is asking the question that cannot justify to the white child hacked in bed. In this Mau Mau uprising, the the white targets were mostly the white settlers who lived separately somewhere unprotected and became the easy victims of these rebels. And the poet or the narrator is asking, was the child, the white child who was hacked in the bed when he was in sleep, can it justify the atrocities perpetuated by the colonial policy to savages, expendable as Jews? And he's asking that can savagery be justified? Can violence be justified against violence or exploitation or any such atrocities? Expendable as Jews. He is bringing the reference to the Holocaust. When the Nazis, they massacred the Jews in the concentration camps because they thought that historically the Jews had exploited them, the Jews had dominated them. So, can it be justified that we will be able to reverse the history? We will be do justice to the history by killing the innocent people, the hapless people, thrashed out by beaters. The long rushes break in a white dust of levies whose cries have wheeled since civilizational dawn. Again, in the beginning of this second stanza, the poet is bringing out another image of the African continent. Traced out by the beaters, how the African people are living there. They are the beaters, means they are the food gatherers, the hunterers mostly. So, thrashed out by the beaters, the long rushes break in a white dust of leaves. These people, they are going through the wilderness, trying to collect their food, trying to hunt the animals and the birds by beating the bushes and ibises, the white, long-necked, long-beaked birds. They are beating their long wings, which is bringing out the white dust, whose cries have wheeled since civilization's dawn. And it cries, that means it is also hunted. So the hunting, it is beginning, it is there, wheeled since civilization's dawn. So the African people, mostly, they live within the nature. They are in harmony with nature, though they are living off the nature. But they are a part of the nature. From the parched river or beast teeming plain, Africa is having rivers and beast teeming plains. There are plains where the beasts are being tamed. Either they are hunted or they are tamed, but there the nature, agriculture and culture is having a peaceful coexistence since the beginning. The violence of beast on beast is read as natural law. So the narrator or the poet is telling that this violence, which is a part of the nature, because it is the question of survival. So violence for survival, for essential livelihood, is a natural law. The nature is full of, nature is arrayed in its tooth and claw, as it is said, that there is also violence, violence for survival, violence for life. But upright man seeks his divinity by inflicting pain. But the poet or the narrator is quite anguished that the upright man, the man who is claiming himself to be civilized, what he is doing, he is seeking his divinity by inflicting pain. He wants to feel himself superior. He wants the divinity, the status of the deity by inflicting pain. The Bible says that divinity means it is love. Through love, you become divine. But here, the civilized man, those people who preach the Christianity to these so-called uncivilized in their word, these uncivilized people, they are simply going just against that concept. Instead of love, through pain, they are seeking their divinity. They want to become superior. They want to be God who are punishing, not loving or nourishing. Delirious as these worried beasts, his wars dance to the titan carcass of a drum. Therefore, what is happening on the other side? The black people, the African, they are delirious as these worried beasts. His wars dance to the titan carcass of a drum. Here, drum is another metaphor for African civilization, African culture, where the drums symbolize the sound that creates the space for man within the wilderness. It is a declaration of the man that the wilderness should be repulsed and man will exist. The drum is also the sound of the man to claim its space within nature. But here the drum is dancing to the dance of death. It is not creating the space within the wilderness to survive, but it is the beating, the dance of the death, naked death, to fight against the operations of colonialism, trying to create space for itself, trying to take back the freedom it was having earlier. While he calls courage still that native dread of the white peace contracted by the dead. And the narrator is bringing the two sides of this conflict. On one side, it is called as the courage, still that native dread. The native people, the blacks, they are taking the courage. Why? Because they are always dreadful of the white peace, white man's peace. White man's peace is not the conventional meaning of the peace. Peace means harmony, coexistence, live and let live. No. The colonizer white man's peace is dominance. By dominance, by British oppression, you subjugate the people and bring the peace. Therefore, they are dreadful of that white man's peace contracted by the dead. But those people who have died here, whether they are the blacks or the white, they are being ironically, the poet is ironically telling that they have the white man's peace contracted through death. They have not any peace, but they have simply escaped the life to the peace, because this life is full of so much of violence and conflict. So their death have brought them peace. They have been submitted to death, land of death. Again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of a dirty cause. Again, a waste of our compassion as with Spain. In the third stanza, the poet is bringing out the same issue of the colonial or the imperial exploitation, injustices, violences. Again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of dirty cause. The cause, what is the cause? The cause is on both sides. On the white man's side, it is the cause of civilizing the black. And it is a dirty cause. That who has given the right to the white man to dominate and exploit the black or any other races? Who gave them this right? So this cause is the dirty cause. And on the other side, there is the rebels who are also fighting for their freedom, for their peace, but they are also resorting to the violence. Again, a waste of our compassion as with Spain. And the narrator is telling it is a waste of our compassion. We cannot have compassion for the white people who have died in this rebellion, because he is bringing the reference to the Spanish Revolution in 1936, when the loyalists and the rebels supported by Germany and Italy, they fought. And in this way, what happened? That all these causes, all these false ideologies are creating conflict in humanity, and ultimately there is the loss of the life of the innocent. Those innocent, they are being the victims from both the sides. And as a way, what happens? We cannot have compassion even with the rebels, because the rebels themselves, they have created the violence, and that violence begets violence from the other side, which is already a very powerful force, which is already banking on its violent power. So, a waste of our compassion as with Spain. So, we cannot have compassion for either the rebels or the white people, because both are putting the life of the innocent people, the land and the culture into the risk. The gorilla wrestles with the Superman. The gorilla is the tribal people of Kikyu who are fighting with the Superman. The white man considers, the British consider themselves as the Superman. They wanted to rule all over the world. They wanted to create the empire where the sun will never set. So they are the Superman. The gorilla wrestles with the Superman. The gorilla cannot exactly fight with the Superman. I who am poisoned with the blood of both, where shall I turn, divided to the vein? So the narrator or the poet is asking, if this is the scenario, I cannot compassionate with anyone. I cannot simply side with anyone. I can blame both. Both have the frailties, both have the unnecessary or dirty causes. Therefore, he is telling, I who am poisoned with the blood of both. He is not telling blessed, he is using the word poison. He is telling that by inheriting the blood from the both the races, what I have done, where shall I turn? Where shall I go? So it is one of the most poignant crisis of colonialism. That colonialism has created this hybrid races who neither belong to the natives completely, nor they belong to the colonizers completely. They are being targeted from both the ends, and they suffer for both because they have the blood and culture of both. So he is telling, I who am poisoned with the blood of both, where shall I turn? Divided to the vein? Can I divide my blood within my vein? The blood cannot be divided, they have been blended. I who have cursed the drunken officer of British rule, how choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love? And he's telling that I have been very critical. I have cursed the drunken officer of British rule, because the British imperialism was based on the violence and exploitation of their unruly officers. The greatest example of it in literature is Joseph Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness, where the character Crouch is found to be an ivory merchant, but he inflicted so much of violence, exploitation on these tribes, devastated the whole villages, massacred the people, epitomizing the effects of colonization. So he's telling that he has cursed the drunken officer of British rule. How choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love? But how can I? In which language I will curse? In which language I will criticize? Because both the languages are dear to me. I am an inheritor of both the languages. I use both the languages to express my emotions, my feelings. So how can I use the same language to curse these same people? So between African language and the English language, both whom I love, how can I choose one? Betray them both or give back what they give? So can I betray them both? Should I give up both the languages or give back what they give, or give back? I will be serving them what they are serving to others, to me, because when they are abusing or perpetuating violence on the Africans, one part of me is suffering. When the Africans are killing the white or abusing them, one part of me is suffering. So betray them both or give back what they give. How can I face such a slaughter and be cool? So this is a mindless violence. This is just simple slaughter. This is no freedom struggle. This is no civilization either from the other side. So this is simply slaughtering without sense, nonsensical slaughtering. So in this situation, how can I be cool? A man, a sensible man, how he can be cool in such a situation, and who belongs to both the races? So this is a very troublesome situation. This is a very critical situation where you cannot have peace, because neither you can blame someone completely nor you can praise someone completely. How can I turn from Africa and live? So coming to the locality, the poet or the narrator is telling that how can I turn from Africa? So this Africa is a different Africa from the Africa at the beginning. It is not the Africa of pride. It is not the Africa of the flies. It is not the Africa of the nature, culture, symbiosis. It is the Africa where both are existing but in antagonization. So how can I turn from Africa and live? But in spite of that, what is my identity? If I leave this Africa, if I leave this situation, what is my identity? Where I will live? Where is the space? Where is the identity that I can identify myself? So the poet is going through a great agony, and the poem is an impartial presentation of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, the guerrilla war fought between the Kenyan and the British colonizers. The speaker, with a dual belongingness, casts a non-partisan approach to the event. On the one hand, he hates the imperialism, and on the other hand, he also protests the violence perpetuated on the part of the rebels for their cause. The unbiased poetic sensibility may create a sense of ambivalence and confusion about the poet's subjectivity, as we have found at the end of the poem. But ultimately, it highlights the deep pain and anguish that is quite persistent with such experiences. The spirit of universal humanism becomes the poetic spirit over here. So, the main theme, the important theme of this poem is the legacies of colonialism, confused identity, and anxiety. The speaker, the speaker lingers in the painful contradictions of divided identity or split identity, and the poet's hybrid heritage prevents him from identifying directly with one culture. Thus, it creates a feeling of isolation, and Walcott depicts Africa and Britain in the standard roles of the vanquished and the conqueror. Although he portrays the cruel imperialistic exploits of the British without creating sympathy for the African tribesmen as well. It objectively allows the poet to contemplate the faults of each culture without reverting to the bias created by attention to moral consideration. However, he contradicts the severe image of the British through an unfavorable description, and the African associated with a primitive natural strength and the British portrayed as an artificially enhanced power remains equal in the contest for control over Africa and its people. So, in this way, the poet is expressing his divided loyalties, which is engendered through a sense of guilt as he wants to adopt the civilized culture of the British but cannot excuse their immoral treatment of the Africans. And through the poem, he reveals the extent of his consternation through the poet's inability to resolve the paradox of his hybrid inheritance. So, from this poem, there can be different questions like justifying the title, and also the question about what are the thematic concerns being addressed by the poet in this poem, or the narrative personae.